Today's Tuesday, the 28th, and let's have a Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. Do you want to do roll call, or would you like me to do roll call?
You have at it.
Okay. Marmelo.
Here. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, we're doing roll call.
Oh,
Christie is absent.
somewhere.
Gardner is absent. Watson here. Gaba is absent. Thomas
Present.
and Deacon.
Here.
Thank you. For president. Okay. The business this evening is to discuss the rent control ordinance. So I will open it up to Zach or the public.
Zach, could you just mind introducing yourself and give a brief overview of what council has before them?
Sure, I'm Zach Mosier, the planning director here for the town of Standish. Just a little background on this ordinance was that I believe a few months ago, the ordinance committee was approached by a resident here in Standish to consider an ordinance, and the ordinance committee, which is made up of 3 counselors, for those who don't know, decided it was better to hold a public workshop. So more counselors were here, and the public was invited. That's kind of the history. I mean, the ordinance itself, and just some highlights of the ordinance itself is that it creates a hard cap on rent increases in Standish of 10%. And it, as presented, this ordinance applies only to landowners with more than 11 units. And I think the big thing is to understand that enforcement of this ordinance doesn't really fall on the town of Standish. It would fall on the tenant to hire an attorney and help use that as a method to go through the courts, because the town really has no mechanism, the staff time or any kind of staff time to really enforce this. We really can't do much at the town level with this. So if there's more questions you have, please ask.
This time I'm going to open up to public comments. Let's keep our comments of 5 minutes. When you come up, state your name and et cetera. So whenever.
I am Daniel, sorry about that. I'm Daniel White. I live in the Pine Tree Estates mobile home park. And after finished reading this, I didn't see any provision in here that would cover us there, because we're only renting the land. We're not renting the unit itself. We own it. So, and that's the case with everybody who lives there, the 150 units right down the street. So does this ordinance confront that or no?
It says on the definitions, page 2, housing unit, I believe would cover the mobile home park, where it says one or more rooms, including a building physically located within the town and that form a single unit used or intended for use as a residence under the terms of a lease or rental agreement.
So any rental agreement, whether or not it's just land or housing, right? Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That was my main concern.
Hey, Teresa Kim. I live in Pine Tree Estates, and I'm actually the one that brought this to Zach and requested it. The initial ordinance request was at 5% for the town, and I know where a lot of the council members have property, that was kind of like a turnoff for it. And I see the current ordinance is 10%, which we'd like to be able to try to negotiate that a little bit, and I'm sure everybody behind me can explain why. But yeah, it's bumped up to now 11 units, and then we were also wondering if there's a possibility if we did a hard stop at 10% for rental units, but possibly exempt the mobile home park to a lower amount because of the projected expansion and affordable housing. It would be a lot better. I will say I just got done doing a bunch of research, and currently Pine Tree Estates incoming rent is $890. That's higher than anybody within Cumberland and York County. Pine Haven down in Saco is at $750. Friendly Village is at 620. Old Orchard itself is at 702. And the rest of them are all lower than that, all the way up to Brunswick Thompsons are still in the 400s. So big difference, a lot less to offer, especially here in the town. In addition to that, I just got done doing a ton of research. And by having rent caps, it actually makes affordable housing affordable. It doesn't hurt the landlords. It doesn't, make it so they don't want to build in an area. It just lessens of what they can actually charge overhead long-term wise. So it cuts at their profit, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to come in town and still expand and build. In the past, we have had state legislation that said 4% on rent increases, and we were not even close to the housing issues we have right now in the homeless population. So that's what I'll say. Thanks.
Come on up to the mic, sir.
Councilors, Ms. Manager, I'm Sam Sherry. I'm an attorney. I represent landlords. My practice is in Portland. I'm not here tonight for any particular client. I'm here as a board member of the Rental Housing Alliance of Southern Maine. The RHA is a voluntary affinity group for landlords, and we have about 500 members. I apologize for being here in jeans. I didn't know I was coming here this morning, but here I am. Our position, the RHA's position, is that because the town doesn't actually have data about how many rental units are in town, doesn't have information about how those units work or don't, that with enormous respect, you lack the data to provide the context for this ordinance. You don't know who you're affecting or how much of the town's housing stock you're affecting, and that makes it hard to see how you're affecting it. The RHA encourages the council to set this proposal aside, take up a safety registration ordinance so that rental units are registered. That will give you a count of the rental units in the town, and it will give you a very firm, if not precise, idea about exactly how much of the town's housing stock would be affected if you choose to take something like this up in the future. We all know that whether we are talking about municipal ordinances or national laws or state laws, the name of the game is ready, aim, fire. What questions can I answer?
We actually just had a meeting with GP Cog, and we're talking about a software that's going to track the rentals. So we are looking at that. But again, this wasn't initiated by staff. It just was something that was brought forth to ordinance, and this is the opportunity to talk about it.
I understand. Again, our position is that you're talking about something, you lack the data to be able to say exactly what, and that is really critical. The proposed ordinance before you is modeled on the South Portland ordinance. I was asked to testify when that was under consideration. I did so several times. I remember one South Portland Council meeting that got done at about 12:45 p.m., 12:45 a.m., and I encourage you not to do that tonight. The RHA notes that the model which was adopted in South Portland and which is under consideration here calls for hearings, thoughtfulness, input, drafts, evolution, and is in that respect unlike the Portland ordinance, which was cooked up by 4 people in a back room. This is how better legislation gets created, and we salute you for going through this process. A modest amount of time, resulting in an actually more responsive, better workable product, is better for the town. And indeed, we are watching landlords pull their money out of Portland every single week because the market for rental property in Portland is quite heavily diminished. We're watching landlords who are unable to pay to improve their properties because they can't recoup their costs. And the model before you takes all that into consideration, and in that respect is better than the Portland model. I don't want to leave you with the impression that the Rental Housing Alliance is here tonight in support of rent control, but we are in support of the process which you have set out, and we salute you for taking input and acting in a measured fashion. Again, our position is gather more data and come back to this. If no one has more questions, that would be
May I
it.
ask a question?
Sure.
Has any, in your organization, because they may have thought about this any number of times in different communities over a period of time, have you thought about, or has there been discussion about limiting increases to inflation or cost of living or a portion of cost of living? For example, Social Security and things of that nature go up a certain amount based on actual cost of living. Instead of having like 5%, 10%, or some other random amount, cost of living would associate it with something you might say is realistic, the tangible, the real cost of things.
Mr. Deacon, here's the best response I can give you. Right now, there are only 2 communities in Maine that have enacted rent control. One is Portland, the other is South Portland. The South Portland model has the same 10% cap, use it or lose it model, which you have before you tonight. The Portland model has a cost of living which is based on the metropolitan Boston, Massachusetts area. I don't know when or how statistics are derived for Standish, but I certainly submit that the cost of living changes in Standish are not necessarily the same as they are on Munjoy Hill or in Augusta or in Bangor or in South Portland. And it takes an enormous amount of delay before costs rise, get translated into statistics, and actually provide data. So I think that in many respects, the fixed number is probably a more feasible, practical, and fair amount than a delayed number generated elsewhere in the state or elsewhere in New England. Is that a fair answer?
Yes, although I would say that I know from a number of other things that I've read that the Greater Boston statistical metropolitan area does cover southern Maine and New Hampshire in many ways.
Go Sox.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate it.
Just a comment.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned another ordinance was cooked up by 4 people in a back room. You don't have to worry about that happening in Standish because we're not cooking anything up in any back rooms, I can promise you and the public. That's not how it comes about here in Standish. I'm not sure what happens in South Portland, but it isn't going to happen here. And this is just a hearing to listen to people. We're not voting here tonight. There's no votes being taken. All we're doing is getting input, I guess, to see if we're going to move forward with this. And the first person that ever said they were sorry for wearing jeans in Standish, because I think everybody included has jeans. So this is the first for me to hear that you have to apologize for wearing jeans in Standish. So I just want to let you know that.
Councilor Pomerleau, I take it all back. I'm mighty glad to be here in Levi's tonight. My reference was to the distinction between this proposal here tonight and the way it's handled here, which is as it was handled in South Portland,
Okay, good. Thank you.
as distinct from what happened in Portland, which is that the voters of Portland were handed language
Right.
and told, you folks say yes or no right here, right now. And that is not what is happening here. And we and the RHA salute you for that, all of you singular and you collectively. Thank you for the chance to speak with you this evening.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Kerry Kohanek, I live in Pine Tree Estates. Sorry for my attire.
You're from Standish?
And I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. So here's my take on it, and this is take from the outside. Anybody who's ever heard me, I come right from the heart. I won't pee on your leg and tell you it's raining. So here it goes. This, my opinion, this whole thing started when Pine Tree Estate corporate came in and started stirring the pot, wanting more and more and more and more. And my opinion, you guys caved, gave them what they wanted, and it's not affecting them whatsoever in their pocketbook to a certain point. They're going to make much more profit with the expansion, all that. But let's talk about present day. We've got 223 units, I believe that's what was told to me. I'm not a wagering man, but I would bet everything in my pocket that 10 of those people don't pay the exact same amount. That's the first thing. Secondly is no one gets a set increase. I think that, I won't mention names of the people that were here, sit in a room at the end of the fiscal year and say, okay, we're $75,000 short. What do we do? Well, we got 223, hold on. That's the increase. That's what it feels like. So this 10% increase may not seem like a lot to you guys, okay? And listen, I love Standish with every inch of my heart and soul. I love the people. I'm honored to live here. But for this example, I don't really care about anybody outside of Pine Tree Estates, just for this conversation, all right? 10% increase is going to force several people into really, really tight situations where it's eat or pay the lot rent. Buy oil or pay the lot rent. Now, the big boys in New York or wherever the RHP is from, don't vote for you. They could care less about you. Us, on the other hand, we do vote for you. Us, on the other hand, care about you, genuinely, because you're one of us. So, my opinion, very simple, is you'd put that 5% and say, it's 5% for my people. You wouldn't take 10%, FYI, this isn't South Portland, this isn't Portland, all right? No amenities whatsoever around here like that. If I want a fast food hamburger, I've got to go to Wyndham. I've got to go. So none of that. So you can't take that example, in my opinion, and say, there it is. That's what we're going to use. And like this gentleman said, the well-dressed man said that there's no examples here. There's no studies here. Like this gentleman has said, you don't have the staff on duty or on payroll to monitor this thing. So let's make life very simple, because I'm a simple guy, all right, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and here it is, 5% max. Don't have to be 7, doesn't have to be 10 to take care of RHP, all right? Doesn't have to take 5%, because these are the people that not only vote for us, but care for us. We see them in Hannaford's. We see them in the doctor's office. That's the people that we should be concerned about, or you should be concerned about, not the corporate. All right? You want to, I'm sure, I know you want to get the tax base up and all that. All right. But if we can't live here, we're gonna have to roll out of Standish and get a box underneath the bridge. And there's a lot of people in that community, my community, that are to that point. I mean, instead of when you run into somebody, I'm sorry.
That was your timer, so if you
Oh,
want
I'm
to
sorry.
wrap it up real
Okay.
quick, that'd be great.
All right, I'm just gonna say one thing. When you run into somebody in the mailbox and they start talking about how tight budgets are, it affects me as a human being. I'm sorry.
I have a question, if I may. Sure. The Federal Reserve Board has been trying for a number of years to tame inflation, and their goal is to keep things around 2%. What sense does it make to say something 5%, which is 250% above what the Federal Reserve wants to keep things under control?
I agree.
And 10% would, even beyond that. I mean, I understand it costs to repair and maintain insurance. There are issues, there are catastrophic events, acts of God. Anybody who owns any property knows insurance companies can, leave you out to dry with saying, well, I'm sorry, water damage not covered, or some kind of act of God. So what's your sense of instead of 5 or 10%, limiting it to something like inflation or a percentage of inflation or no more than cost of living or some method like that?
Very good. Matt? Okay. Listen, sir, the only reason I said 5% is that's what was mentioned, all right? I agree with you 100%. It should be based upon something such as that, all right? 2.5%. Once again, I'm more concerned about the lives of the people that live in my community, all right, and keeping them there. And being able to eat and pay doctor bills and all those things. So if you guys would do a 2.5%, I think that would be, that would make my heart so joyful. It just really would, because that's the right thing to do. And once again, the only reason I started at 5% is that through the discussion it was thrown up that's where it started at, right? But if you could put a 2% cap on it, or that would be a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments, sir.
Hi, I'm Heather Richards, and I live in Pine Tree Estates. I was one of the individuals that worked on the original draft of this with Teresa Kim. Putting it simply, you want numbers, you want data, here's your data. Most people who buy mobile homes are people who cannot afford an apartment or cannot afford to buy a house. That is rapidly changing in Maine. When I moved into my trailer probably 6 years ago, the rent was about $485. My rent has gone up 36% since I moved in. Last year, the increase was right around 8% if you add the amount they charge me for my oil tank. If they continue to charge me at that same rate over the next 10 years until I retire, my lot rent will be almost $1,500 a month, and I will have to make a choice. I will have to either retire or keep my house, but I can't do both. So if it's at 10%, which is even higher, I stand to actually lose my home before I retire. I bought this trailer to be my retirement home. I don't have a nice cushy 401k. I'm going to have to live on Social Security, and I know that. And so the way I look at it right now, I've already lost everything. It's just a question of when. 5% might allow me to keep my home and be able to retire. And as far as, you know, cutting into profits and all that stuff, you know, RHP wants to add all those brand-new homes, and we're getting a whole tetherball and 2 benches out of it. Whoopee! They're gonna make probably a couple of $1 million off that deal, and that's before anybody pays any rent. That's just selling the homes. And what we get out of it is a tetherball and 2 benches. Thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Heather White. I also live in Pine Tree Estates. Just wanted to say thank you for mentioning the fact about it being kind of negotiable, like a 2%, which triggered thinking, you know, ones that, depending on your income, whether it's Social Security, fixed income, or through your employment, not everyone gets a 10% increase. If we have a 10% increase in lot rent, do I have a 10% increase in my pay this year? No, not even remotely close. So a 2% would be in line with, okay, I made extra money this year, but not all of it has to go towards lot rent, which is only a fraction of all the utilities and expenses that come out of our pocket on land that we have our home on with limited to no special, you know, advantages. We don't have a swimming pool, we don't have, you know, tetherball, volleyball field, so we have very limited, you know, things that say, hey, this is a great place to live other than just the place for the house. So, thank you.
I didn't really say anything about the rent or anything.
No, you've had your time, so we'll
That's it. Okay.
let others go. Thank you.
My name is Alberta Burns, and I own 2 4-units in town. And it takes money to keep my properties maintained. And my rents are low. One of these people can actually rent one of my units for $10 more than what they're paying for their lot rent. But in any case, at 2%, I would not be able to maintain my properties. I have snow plowing, I have lawn mowing, I just put a new roof on one of the properties, the big one, up by Aroma Joe's, the old Masonic Hall. That's one heck of a roof. That cost me a heck of a lot of money. And I have another one that needs a new roof, and it's about the same height. I wouldn't be able to maintain anything on 2%. And there's other things like, why should, my rents are reasonable, but they do need to go up. They're not in line with other rents and other people. But, you know, some years I may not need to raise the rent. And your plan has a use it or lose it thing. But then I know that other towns, if you don't raise the rent to the full percent, you can carry that over to the next year. And so your plan just doesn't make sense to someone like me. And I guess that's all I have to say at the moment. But I do keep my rents low as possible, so I have good people. I'd much rather have good people in my apartments than people that cause me problems. So right now I make the rents reasonable. But if it's a use it or lose it, I might have to use it. I also might have to not have these, or maybe sell them. But I actually planned on creating more multi-units at reasonable prices. And if I can't maintain them, I mean, my insurance on one of my properties doubled from $2,000 to $4,000 this year. And that's ridiculous. So those people might get a rate increase. But that's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I have just a question.
For me?
Yes.
Okay.
Come up to the mic just so everybody can hear at home. Thank you.
I just had a question. You do understand that this ordinance they're proposing would only be for housing units that have 11 or more units, right?
I plan on building more.
But I would think that if you have a 4 here, a 4 here, and a 4 here, none of those are 11 units or more.
It adds up to 12.
It would apply at that point,
It would apply at that
Yeah.
point? Okay.
but I could,
Question answered.
Thank you.
I mean, everything in this ordinance is up for, if, we really just need to figure out if council's amenable to something like this moving forward, and we can fine tune it to be the 15 units or more, that's on the table, so.
I'm going to ask you, and maybe you can clarify, because one question I received today was, does this only count for Standish units, or is this units in general across the state?
Units in Standish.
Thank you.
Just so council know too, I received 2 emails, lengthy ones, that they do not support the ordinance. They do not want to see it go forward. I did email them both to you.
So my name is Elise Damaris, and I'm neither a renter nor a landlord. I'm actually a local CPA, and I'm just invested in keeping this community a great place to live. I think that despite having commendable aims, rent control is a bad policy that really oversimplifies the problem of housing costs, and it's going to negatively impact tenants, landlords, and property owners alike. I really understand wanting to lower housing costs and enable people to remain in their homes. But while some people assume that caps on rent increases will decrease rental costs, research has found that the opposite is actually true. Rent caps decrease supply because existing renters are less likely to move voluntarily, even when a unit no longer suits their needs, while simultaneously increasing demand, which leads to increased prices. When forced to keep existing rentals below market price, landlords frequently find ways to remove renters from their homes to enable them to increase rents without restriction. People will say, oh, I need it for owner occupancy, or oh, I need to make a major renovation, and oh, there's a lease violation. And suddenly people are forced to find new homes. The displaced renters are often unable to find new housing in their town due to these increased prices caused by the policy. Furthermore, rent control will result in lower quality housing options because landlords will compensate for reduced income with reduced repairs and maintenance to keep their units profitable. Landlords may also switch their properties to short-term rentals, which further decreases housing supply and I think is very disruptive to residential communities. And I also understand wanting to help people who have lower income be able to afford housing, but this rule simply subsidizes existing tenants at the expense of new tenants and landlords. And the proposed 10% cap is completely arbitrary and not benchmarked to inflation or housing prices. In some years, it may not be enough for landlords to keep up with their own cost increases, particularly when utilities are included in the lease. I know that personally, real estate taxes on my own home have gone up over 50% since 2019. Not due to improvements, just standard increases. And the 10% policy also incentivizes increasing rent to the maximum amount. Before implementing any change, we need to ensure that it is an improvement on the current system for our town as a whole. The burden of proof is on those advocating for the change. They need to show that this is a good policy for the town as a whole, not that it would benefit individuals, but it is a good policy for the town as a whole. In this case, there's extensive research on the topic showing that it has long-term costs to everyone in the community except the renters who are able to retain rent-controlled units. I did research on this topic myself, and I have some to share with you. Dr. Christian Niemitz is part of the Institute for Economic Affairs, their editorial director. Here's a quote. Economists are a notoriously divided profession. Ask 3 economists and you get 4 opinions. But there are exceptions to this, and the study of rent controls is one of them. This is an area where the empirical evidence really overwhelmingly points in the same direction. The finding that rent controls reduce the supply and quality of rental housing, reduce housing construction, reduce mobility among private tenants, and lead to a misallocation of the existing rental housing stock is as close to a consensus as economic research can realistically get. I would also encourage the council to do research on this topic in terms of the many meta-studies that are out there and literature reviews. There's a current book, The War on Prices by Ryan Bourne. There's a chapter under Rent Controls, Everyone Pays, that addresses this. There's a huge meta-study by Konstantin Kolodilin, March 2024, Journal of Housing Economics, Rent Control Effects Through the Lens of Empirical Research. He reviewed, I believe it was a couple hundred studies all over the world, different time periods, different towns, different countries, and the results are pretty much the same. Again, Britain's Institute of Economic Affairs did a similar overview. 14 out of 17 studies that addressed the topic found that rent control leads to higher rents in the uncontrolled sector. 12 out of 16 studies found negative effects on housing supply, while 11 out of 16 studies found negative impacts on new construction. 15 out of 20 studies found rent control leads to reduced housing quality and maintenance, and all 14 studies examining the issue found rent control leads to misallocation of housing. When you have artificially reduced prices, people are very hesitant to leave those rent-controlled units, even when they may find a better place to be based on their situation. You know, rather than consolidating and living with a roommate, they may choose to retain a unit all to themselves, again, decreasing supply and not allowing the free market to make adjustments as necessary. We need more options for housing in Standish, not more restrictions on the free market. And the right thing isn't taking from investors to give to renters. That's not our control. We need to have policies that encourage growth and the free market. It's essentially an assistance program that's just coming out of landlords' pockets and negatively impacting the town as a whole. When the research is this comprehensive, we need to ask ourselves why we would be different.
Questions for her? Thank you.
I'm Clyde Bello, and I live at Pine Tree Estate on Pine Tree Estate. We own our own trailer. We are responsible for everything that goes on in that trailer. If your hot water heater goes, if you have a leak, they don't help that. I understand the landlords have their issue, but we pay to have everything fixed in our home, not Pine Tree Estates. They don't, they plow the roads and they mow certain area. All they want to do is hike everything and take. They want to take most of our playground for our kids away. So I understand the people that own different apartments, what they're going for, but we're going to protect our homes so we can live there. We just own a little piece of their property. So please take that into consideration. Thank you.
Dave McNatt, resident of Standish, own a mobile home park, embarrassed. I was going to keep my mouth shut, but I've been pushed into this. Pine Tree is the highest in the area for rent. Unfortunately, we're the lowest in the area. We're $400 a month. I look at a 10% cap, it almost automatically makes me want to increase the rent 10%, compounding every year. If you manage your money, you don't have to. So as long as you get a fair return on your investment, you don't have to keep robbing your tenants. Well, about a third of my tenants are single people. A lot of them are elderly. In fact, almost all of them are elderly. We're all elderly. But it's just, I'm very opposed to a cap on the increase. If I have a major expenditure, yes, I have to go up on the rent. But if it is just rubbish removal and snow plowing, yeah, you go up. Whatever they increase theirs, you just increase yours. I suppose I've been a fool by not saying I'm going to get 30% more or whatever over the years. It's been 38 years, and I haven't gone that much. So it's, I mean, it's embarrassing as, you know, it makes me feel like a sucker in a sense that I haven't abused my tenants. But I've got good people. So it's just, I don't want to be forced to increase the rents. That's all I have.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So from your perspective as an owner who, tying the increase to actual costs could be important to you, so that if it's a flat amount of, say, 10%, there's an incentive to, whether you need it or not, to increase it that amount every year because you can. Whereas if it's tied in some way to actual costs, and do you think it's reasonable to gather that information to what the actual cost would be? If from a performance perspective, if someone said to you, can you detail me the cost per unit of your actual increases in operating expenses and what they're based on? That they're based on the plowing cost or something else? Would you be able to
Utilities
do
and things
that?
like that.
Would you be able to gather that information to justify that type of an increase? Is that unreasonable to do?
No, that can be done very easily. You know, if I need $90,000 to repair the road, yes, I can't take that out of my pocket. I'll have to increase the rent.
But you would have I guess what I'm looking for is, you would have an actual cost or an estimate from a contractor as to what that cost would be, as the basis for justifying the rent increase to substantiate that particular increase.
Anything above whatever you're going to set, if you set, yeah.
Thank you.
David, you're my hero tonight. Thank you for telling us what you charge at your
But I feel
really
like a sucker
appreciate
now
hearing that.
because it's too low. But I haven't needed it.
Dave, I have one question for you, and maybe it dovetails with Mr. Deacon. If a rent control thing went through, you would then feel obligated to charge whatever that increase was per year, that percentage?
Just to cover unforeseen things in the future.
Right. Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comments, or anybody else wants to come up and speak? Yes, sir.
My name is Bruce Knowlton. I have what I believe is more than 11 units in this town that I rent out. As I'll say, my father-in-law has stated, I would feel a necessity to go up on my rents. I have rents that are extremely low. I have an elderly person that's been in their apartment for 13 years in the same spot, and we just went up. We talked to her because of raising oil prices and the whole increase that everything has gone, and she had to go up over 10% of what her rent was. I wouldn't be able to do that, so that would mandate now that all my rents would have to go up every year if you put this into place. I feel bad for everybody that's in Pine Tree, but everybody that's standing up here that is for this is from Pine Tree, and we're looking to enact a whole sectional law to govern one property and one property owner and one landlord. And it's gonna affect a lot more landowners and landlords in this town by doing it, and it's gonna increase the costs in this town. Their purpose, right at the beginning, it says that it should provide a landlord fair and reasonable return on their investment. Who's gonna make that decision? If that 10% doesn't work at some point, is the town then gonna set up a board to go over people's costs, the landlord's expenses? Are you gonna micromanage what a business is gonna do? And that becomes a problem at that point. A simple thing that happens here in town, I mean, just recently, we can look at the price of eggs. Are we gonna mandate the price of eggs on Hannaford because they doubled the price of eggs right now? But you can go to a local farm and get them for still at $3.50 a dozen, and they're selling them now for $7. Are we gonna have to go through everything when one business does something that's wrong and put it as a blanket thing on everybody else and make more bureaucracy by doing so? I am not for a rent control for this article. I don't know what we can do for Pine Tree. There is a problem there, I acknowledge that, but it is gonna affect the rest of the town as well when this happens, because I'm not hearing anybody but Pine Tree come up. Who else in town is coming in here? There are other parks in town that are having these problems. So the town needs to address Pine Tree more than they need to address the whole rental issue in the town that is working fine. I feel very bad for every one of you guys there. You've got a bad landlord, and it's a difficult thing. And the hard part with it is if they add another 120 units or whatever they're going to add there, they believe that they can still charge these rates and do it, which is scary.
It's an out-of-state firm.
Yep.
The landlord doesn't even live here.
Yep.
All the money they take from
Okay.
Costco's out-of-state.
You've had your time, you don't have the mic, I'm sorry.
I gotta get the little one to bed, but thank you for listening loud. I'll hear
Thank you.
Do you have any questions
Any
for
questions
me?
for him? Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to come up and speak? Okay, then I'm going to close the public comments, and do we want to hear from, oh, I'm sorry, come on, I'll let you up, come on up.
Hi there. I'm Dennis O'Brien. I live in Pine Tree Estate. I've been there since 2018, and my rent then was $490, and now it's up to $685. So that's in that 6 years or whatever it is. At first, it was a reasonable increase, but it wasn't owned by RHP. It was owned by another company. Then RHP bought it out. And it was after that, everything started increasing. And I'm retired. I'm on Social Security. I get 2.3, whatever it is, COLA in my Social Security. I have a little bit of a dividend that I get money on, and that's what I live on. So when they jumped that thing this time from, I think it was 639 to 689 or whatever it is right now, they jumped 7-point-something% this year, and that was ridiculous. And basically when they do move it up, or they jump, there's not really any improvement, that much improvement in the park. One time they put up new stop signs, and they haven't paved the roads. All they do is plow the snow in the winter. They do not pick up trash. They don't do any of that. You mow your own lawns. They pump the water in the sewer. That's it. So you take care of your own property. So why this time they jumped it that much, I don't understand at all. One thing they did last year, they put up new solar panels that they've got new, on the entrances, they've got solar panels that, I guess, way out there, and wherever they're from, Indiana or whatever they are, Iowa, they've got TV cameras on there watching people come in and out of the park. The main office has no control over it. They don't see any what's going on. But they put solar panels, two entrances and some other place. They probably paid thousands of dollars for that. Okay, so they're watching people come in and out of the park, out there. So, but it doesn't help us any. And the roads need paving. I know the old part of the park, which was built back in the 60s or whatever it was, their water mains keep breaking every year. I live in the new part of the park, so I don't have any problems. I'm in Deer Hill Avenue. And, but the old part, every year they got water pipe breaks. They need to tear the whole thing up and put new water lines in, but you don't see it happening. But percentage-wise, for the increases, 2.5 is what I make a year. So this 10% thing is way over. But I did think, well, I suppose with 5% I could put up with. But when they jumped at 7% this year, and who knows what they're gonna do next year, it's kind of scary. But I'd like to see something like, for the town of Standish, or any rentals in the whole town. I mean, everybody has rentals. You get rental units, 5%. I could live with 5% increase, but I could not go with 10%. And the 7 just about killed me, so we'll see what happens. Thank you for listening to us, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to close public comment time now. Is there any discussion through the council?
I just went over some numbers here. I don't think I'm going to support a 10%. If we're going to do something, I don't think 10% is the number. But I think we need to focus on, if there's any way to do it, focus on Pine Tree, because we can see the good people here tonight that really, truly believe in affordable housing in Standish. When you got 2 trailer parks, one picks up the trash and plows, and the other one plows, and basically it's double the money. But I just went through it quick. at 850. The second year, if it went up 10% every year, you'd be at 935. The third year, you'd be at 1,028. Fourth year, you'd be at 1,248. Fifth year, you'd be around 1,367. This is what you'd be paying a month if they went up 10% every month. Seventh year, you'd be at 1,600. Eighth year, in at 10%, you'd be at 18, 19. And in 10 years, if they went 10% a year, you'd be at 2197. That's what you'd be paying in Pine Tree Trailer Park if we went 10%. So in 10 years, they would be paying $2,200 if I did my numbers. I did them quick, but I think I'm pretty close. And something should be done because this is a community that, we need in Standish, and to drive these people out of town because of how it's going about now. And we're doing a tax reval in Standish, and Pine Tree hasn't been revaled in I don't know how many years. And all they're going to do with this, and they're going to get a huge reval, and it's time to take our, sunglasses off. They're going to get a huge increase in what they are going to owe the town for taxes. They're going to pass that right along 100%. We all know that. I mean, and so I don't know if this is the answer. The 10% is not the answer, but the 10% isn't an answer for people that really work hard and live here in Maine. Mr. McNutt knows his people. He sees them every day. And like you say, he's embarrassed to come here and speak tonight. And that's sad when he's the cheapest one in town. He should be standing up there on a ladder yelling because of what he's doing for us here in town. So, but I just saying the 10%, if Pine Tree does it, in 10 years, you're going to be paying $2,100 a month rent. So I don't see that helping the town at all or helping them out.
I agree with Phil's comments. I'm personally conflicted out because of my firm's representation. I'm a landlord myself. I'm a commercial landlord. I don't have any residential units on the market, and I represent landlords in my practice. But as a counselor, I think we do need to do something for these residents of Pine Tree, but I don't think it's at the expense of our other landlords here in town. Can I ask Mr. McNutt a question? How many units do you have?
19.
Thank you.
You want 200? We can get them tonight for you.
Go ahead, Zach.
So where the exemptions are, in this ordinance can easily be changed. This 11 units can easily be bumped to 50 to
There you go.
100.
There you go. That's what we should do. Bump it to 100. I agree.
Say that again. I'm sorry, Teresa.
You guys had at the bottom of the paperwork that if it wasn't going to work for all rentals, just...
Teresa, can you come up to the mic and speak, please?
You got to be careful because we have closed the public session and we don't want to get in. But come on up for a second.
You can.
I'm quoting paperwork in my safe.
Okay.
On one of the bottom of the pages, it did say, does it need to be exempted strictly for the mobile home parks in line with what Old Orchard did? Where they had their ordinance done, and it was strictly for only the mobile home parks.
I think it's one or the other. I don't think we can go mobile home park with over 100 units.
No, I'm saying, like, you can resort it just to the mobile home parks.
We could, yes.
Yeah.
But then, yes, or we could do 100 units.
I think the
All
100
I'm saying is
units.
on the paper.
I think the 100 units would be the way to go, or whatever. Let's pick a number.
100 units.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Deacon, you have a question?
Well, the point I wanted to make was, if, whether it's 5%, 10%, that's a lot for somebody that has a fixed income with, every second Wednesday they get a check for Social Security. So I'm thinking that something related to cost of living, a percentage of cost of living, or no more than a certain percentage of a cost of living might be one way, but I'm also amenable to understand that there are things that happen that have to be paid for to maintain our property, so that if there was a catastrophic event that might have a high cost, that there might be a way to show a need for a higher percent. And seemed to indicate that the gentleman who owned one of the trailer parks in town, that's something that could be done. It's not necessarily unfeasible to ask an owner to justify a higher rate based upon actual cost, because they would have some information such as a contractor's estimate or actual bill to justify that. I'm more amenable to something that's related to real world costs. 5% comes out of where? 10% comes out of where? Whereas if it's associated with cost of living, consumer price index, something of that is related to people's real world costs for whether it's eggs or gas, heat, or whatever. It's what people actually pay to live and how it changes every year. So I'm more amenable to something related to that type of a figure, cost of living, consumer price index, or some percentage or multiple of it.
The problem I see with that is I see Pine Tree Estates putting in all of their leases that every year the rent is going to go up based on that number.
That would be better than 5% or 10%.
But then it's not something tangible
Yeah.
that they can figure into their budget at any given time.
I don't know. I think you can figure that out. There's a lot of economists that will predict in advance what cost of living will be over time. And that any reasonable investor will probably have some sense of that as well.
I'm going to mirror what Bill and Jen said, that I'm conflicted on this also because I'm also a landlord. And I think any sort of number we put on it, no matter what number that is, it's going to force that landlord to go up by that percent every year, no matter what. Whereas if we didn't have a number on it, they might not go up, or they might go up just to cover their costs. So, and I'm also a big fan of less bureaucracy and less government, the better, oversight in general, and let people do what they need to do. But just putting a number to it, any number, is going to force that landlord to go up every year, no matter what.
I have a question for the town manager. If an ordinance were crafted to apply only to trailer parks, would it be a conflict of interest for a counselor to vote on an ordinance that's focused on trailer parks when they may have rental units, but they're not trailer parks?
Yeah, they would have to disclose it, and you as a group would need to decide. So I think as it stands now, we could send it back to ordinance, make some changes of changing the units maybe to 100, and an ordinance committee talk about what that number is. But I agree, at a council meeting, they would have to disclose that they are a landlord.
They would disclose it, but it wouldn't necessarily be improper if it's focused on trailer parks of which they have no personal interest in.
That would probably be just something that us as counselors would
Agree.
Determine at that time of the meeting, if yes, it's okay or not okay.
Can I say something before I have to go home and go to bed because I wake up at...
Fortunately, public comments is closed.
I would urge the chair to be lenient to the public if he can.
I'll hear from Zach. You have anything else?
No, I mean.
Back to ordinance committee.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make change, if you want to see this go forward in some form, it's certainly the way to do it would be go back to ordinance committee and fine tune it and then bring it forward. But if us four need to determine if we want to send it back.
Well, I'm actually a landlord too, so if they decide they don't want us to vote, it's kind of going to be a mess anyways, I guess. But I agree. I think it should go back to ordinance. And I think we ought to invite some of these people in. We do post all of our meetings online, so you know when they are. But if we are going to be discussing this, we might want to make these people aware, if we could, you're welcome to come to our meeting and give us all the input that you possibly can. And we meet once a month. Most usually it's like 4 to 6 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. And when we are in ordinance, we'll be discussing a certain thing like this, or maybe one or two things. But everybody's always welcome. Tony comes to more meetings than I do probably, but could be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess, right, Tony?
So we do have a news and announcement that you can sign up for, and you'll be able to get those notifications of when it is. Sir, were you in support of a cap or not?
Yeah, I live in Pine Tree.
Can you just come to that, 30 seconds, because we closed it, the meeting started at 6.
I just got out of work.
Yeah, just tell us what you... No problem.
I live in Pine Tree Estates. I lived there 6 years. I moved into that park because it was a nice park around, and the upkeep was $15 a year. It would go up. Now it goes up $40, $50. Now I'm paying over $700 a month. I'm struggling now. My income only goes up 2% on my pay. That's not that much. You go to Gorham, $600 the cap. It's crazy. And you ask Becky, well, they can do whatever they want. They own the park.
Could you state your name? We need your name.
Michael Johnson.
Thank you.
So we're not making any decisions
Right.
tonight, it's just a chat. So we're gonna kick this back to ordinance, and we'll have another meeting about it. But thank you for sharing your opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
We're all in consensus to send this back to ordinance.
Yeah, I think so. I agree.
Okay, there's no other items tonight, so can we make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor of adjourning? So moved. Thank you, guys.